What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Cali Kid Official Podcast. This is episode number 30, so let's get right into it. So, Double XL has released the 2020 freshman class. Some of the names on there might be familiar, some of them might not be. So, let's get into that. So, one of the first names that was supposed to be on there was Pop Smoke, but what they're saying is that unfortunately they weren't able to put him on there because his management team didn't want him on the cover. I think they probably did that because they didn't want the publication to profit off of his death. So that's probably why they left him off of there. Another person, Don Tolliver, he actually declined to be on the cover. That's typically, some of the situations that occur when this cover or list is put together. You have people that should probably be on there that often decline and whatnot. But let's get to the covers. So we got Polo G, Cowboy, NLE Choppa, Little Key, Chica, Lil TJ, Baby King, Jack Harlow, Rod Wave, Mulatto, 5-Year-Old Foreign, and 24 Karat Golden. Alright, so most of these names I've heard of. Some of these names I haven't. Polo G definitely should be on there. He put out a dope album called the GOAT album. Cowboy, I've heard of him. He got a few records. NLE, he been doing this thing. Lil Keed, I'm not too familiar with him. Chica, never heard of her. Lil TJ, he dropped that State of Emergency project. It has some dope songs on there like Zoo York. Baby King, I listened to a couple of his records. He's kind of whatever for me. Jack Harlow, he got that hit song What's Poppin'. So I think that's the primary reason why they threw him on there for that. So Rod Wave, he been putting out some dope music, some feel good music. A lot of his singles have been doing well. His album has been selling well as well. Mulatto, I've heard of her, but I haven't listened to any of her music. 5-Year-Old Foreign, he's representing the drill wave, and then 24 Karat Golden. As far as like the longevity, the people on here who I think is gonna have the most longevity is probably Polo G and Rod Wave. NLE, he's been doing this thing, but it kind of seems like his songs are kind of repetitive. Like, he didn't remix Shadow Flow I don't know how many different times. So it kind of seems as though he's running out of things to talk about. But he could, have some type of longevity. Little TJ, he's kind of early in his career. But for the most part, I think Polo G and Rod Wave are going to be around. 24 Karat Golden, Baby King. Based off what I've heard, I'm not too high up on them lasting long, but the most interesting part is always the freestyles, so in the cipher, so that's going to be dope. When those come out, I'll be doing reactions to those. But yeah, a lot of times you get these people that come up out of nowhere. Like, usually when you thinking of somebody being on the cover, you should have at least heard of them before. But it is what it is. So we'll just have to stay tuned and see how their careers progress from this time up until a few years after the fact, because that's when we really get to gauge who's who. But moving on from that, Drake released a new record called Laugh Now Cry Later. This is I'm pretty sure it's probably gonna be like the lead single off his upcoming album. So he gave us the name of the upcoming album. It's gonna be called Certified Lover Boy. The music video was dope. The song was dope. I actually did a reaction to it already. You guys can check that out on the channel. It's featuring Lil Durk. Basically, it takes place at the Nike headquarters. You have various special guest appearances from Marshawn Lynch. He actually tackles Drake on the football field. You got Odell Beckham, Kevin Durant, Drewski. Who else? It was a model, but I didn't get her name. But for the most part, it was a dope video. It was like a movie. He actually recreated a couple of famous moments. He and Lil Durk redid the NBA draft day thing, and he also recreated when Muhammad Ali was punching under the water. So That was dope. It was a couple of funny moments in there, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, based off of this album might be, I think in this album might be more personal based off of this record. And on the song, they was taking shots at people. You know, Dirk was getting that 6ix9ine. People saying that Drake was probably getting that Kanye. You know, they're like arch nemesis ever since the situation involving his son. So there's that. But moving on from that, so it's looking like TikTok has been being very naughty. So they've been secretly collecting data, and this was one of the risks that I guess Trump was trying to get people to understand. So it says TikTok was secretly collecting data on its Android app that violated Google protocol. With TikTok currently fighting against an executive order ban in the U.S. by the Trump administration, it now appears the popular app has come under even more scrutiny for collecting MAC addresses without users' consent. A report from the Wall Street Journal details how TikTok stored device-specific addresses through its Android app for a period of at least 15 months between 2018 and 2019 using media access control, or in other words, MAC addresses. Unfortunately, the Google Play Developer Policy Center strictly prohibits practices like this in its policy, which states an app's advertising identifier must not be connected to personal identifiable information. Yeah, because this data can be used to be sold and profited off of, and to track people and all types of crazy stuff. So they're coming under fire for that. So TikTok, they put out a statement. They said, under the leadership of our chief information officer Roland Cloutier Cloutier, who has decades of experience in law enforcement and the financial services industry, we are committed to protecting the privacy and safety of the TikTok community. How? When you violated it by secretly recording people's information. We constantly update our app to keep up with evolving security challenges, and the current version of TikTok does not collect MAC addresses. So that means that the previous version did. So they probably, after they learned that they was going to come under fire for collecting people's data, they changed it. But all this is doing is putting them further and further in a hole. We have never given any U.S. user data to the Chinese government, nor will we do so if asked. But why would you guys collecting the data secretly? I don't understand that. I mean, I have a TikTok account, but I've deleted the app off my phone. I don't use it. And then Instagram, and pretty much hijack their IP. Is like, is that even legal? But this is another step in the battle between big tech companies and government. Speaking of that, Apple has banned Fortnite off of its stores. So apparently, Apple and Google, they take a 30% cut from app developers. Like, if somebody makes an in-game purchase or something through the store, they get a percentage of that, which is why they're sitting before a judicial committee, because that's a form of monopoly. Because if you're an Android user, the only place you can get a Android app is on the Google Play Store, and if you're an iPhone user, the only place you can get it is on the Apple Store. So that's a monopoly. They have a monopoly over it, which is why they're in trouble with the government now. So, and Epic Games had basically subverted this by offering their V-Bucks for $7.99 on a direct payment through their payment system, as opposed to paying $9.99 through the Google system. And so once Apple found out about this, they basically kicked it off of their platform because they wasn't making any money from it. But Epic Games' argument is that other apps do the same thing, and so they've actually filed a lawsuit against Apple, which I was reading about. Yep, see right here it says Apple's treatment of app developers has also come under scrutiny from Congress. Lawmakers on the House Antitrust Subcommittee recently questioned Apple CEO Tim Cook about whether Apple's practices constituted anti-competitive behavior. It does, because you have a monopoly over, the distribution of apps. There's only one place you can get it depending on what type of phone you get. So that's a monopoly. So at some point, there's going to be legislation passed to prevent these companies from doing this, because you have Facebook, you have Apple, you have Amazon. Who else you have sitting before the judicial? And I think it's one other company. But all these companies, and Google, all these companies have a monopoly over pretty much, advertising, app development, and stuff like that. So more than likely, there's going to be sanctions levied against these companies, forcing them to stop doing that. Because that's kind of crazy. It's like all you do is act as like a marketplace for the app, but you're forcing these app developers to give up 30% of, their profits just for hosting it on that platform. And if they choose to not use your platform, you kicking them off of there because they don't want to give you no cut to their money. That's kind of crazy. But let me pull it up. And then Epic Games, they come under fire too for stealing, appropriating black culture and not profiting the originators, like those emote dances that they got on there. They then stole that, and they're basically hiding behind some arbitrary law that says you can't copyright a movement because it doesn't have this many steps or whatever. I think that's bullshit. You stealing somebody else's likeness, you're stealing somebody else's likeness, and you're profiting off of it, and you're not compensating the original, creator behind it. So let's see what it is. Let's see what the thing says. Epic Games is suing Apple. Epic has filed a civil antitrust lawsuit following Apple's removal of Fortnite from the App Store. Game developer and publisher Epic Games has filed a lawsuit. The legal complaint filed in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of California seeks to establish Apple's App Store as a monopoly, which it is, and the civil suit is seeking injunctive relief to allow fair competition in mobile app distribution. Yeah, there's only two places. If you're Android, you can only get from Google. If you're Apple, or should I say iPhone, you can only get from Apple. And those two companies is sitting before a judicial committee because of that. Epic effectively provoked Apple's removals of Fortnite earlier today when it implemented its own payment processing system into the iOS version of the Battle Royale hit, in apparent violation of Apple's App Store guidelines. Epic brings this suit to end Apple's unfair and anti-competitive actions that Apple undertakes to unlawfully maintain its monopoly in two distinct multi-billion-dollar markets. One, the iOS app distribution market, and two, the iOS in-app payment processing market. Yeah, you forcing people to acquire the app off of your store, and then you forcing people to pay through your setup as well. Epic is not seeking monetary compensation from this court for the injuries it has suffered, nor is Epic seeking favorable treatment for itself, a single company. Instead, Epic is seeking injunctive relief to allow fair competition in these two key markets that directly affect hundreds of millions of consumers and tens of thousands, if not more, of third-party app developers. Here are Epic's primary claims in support of the argument Apple has violated U.S. antitrust law. Apple unlawfully maintains its monopoly power in the iOS app distribution market through the anti-competitive acts described herein, including by imposing technical and contractual restrictions on iOS, which prevents the distribution of iOS apps through means other than the App Store. So yeah, that's a monopoly. If you're not allowing people to acquire an app from other places, that makes it a monopoly. So I think Epic is going to win this. Essentially, facility access iOS from the opinion of iOS. To reach iOS users, Apple forces developers to agree to Apple's unlawful terms contained in its developer agreement and to comply with Apple's App Store review guidelines, including the requirement iOS developers distribute their apps through the App Store. These contractual provisions unlawfully foreclose the iOS app distribution market to competitors and maintain Apple's monopoly. Apple has unlawfully maintained its monopoly in these markets through the anti-competitive acts alleged herein, including by forcing through its contractual terms and law policies iOS app developers that sell in-app content to exclusively use Apple's in-app purchase, and preventing and discouraging app developers from developing or integrating alternative payment processing solutions. To reach iOS app users, Apple forces developers to agree to Apple's unlawful terms, including that they use Apple's in-app purchase. Yeah, so basically they're arguing that Apple is forcing them to use their platform in order for people to acquire the app, and then they're secondly forcing the developers to um, use Apple's in-app purchasing system as opposed to developing their own. So yeah, Epic is alleging Apple is a monopoly in the form of the iPhone, the iOS ecosystem, and the App Store that binds them together. It is. And that Apple places unreasonable restrictions on the distribution of iOS apps. Again, the only way to get software onto the iPhone or iPad. The complaint is also alleging Apple places unreasonable restrictions on payment processing within iOS apps. Yeah, they're taking 30% of payments. That's crazy. Which thereby gives Apple 30% of all in-app revenue on the digital goods that make up the entirety of Fortnite's business model. Yeah, Fortnite's business model relies on in-game transactions, and so you're basically taking 30% of that. So basically, they get in. Epic is getting 70 cents on the dollar as opposed to the full dollar. Apple is able to unlawfully condition access to the App Store. So if you guys want to check it out, you can head to The Verge. The whole document and the case file and everything else is on here. So we're just going to have to monitor the situation. I think Epic has a case and that they're going to more than likely win, because this is something that's been going on for a long time with both Apple and Google. And it's not just these companies that feel this way. Congress feel this way as well, which is why those figureheads that I was just talking about are sitting before Congress due to their, unfair, business practices. This same thing happened way back with the gas company, which basically had a monopoly over all the gas stations and stuff, and it was pretty much forced to break apart. But pretty much, Exxon, Arco, all those different gas stations were all once under the gas company, but it's still under the same thing. You just had different people seated over those particular companies. But should be interesting to see how this plays out. But moving on into sports, so a couple of more football players have gotten new contracts. Tight end George Kittle from the Niners gets a new deal. It's 5 years worth $75 million. He receives an $18 million signing bonus. $30 million is guaranteed at signing, and he has $40 million in guaranteed. So roughly, probably about 55 to 60% of his contract is fully guaranteed, and it comes out to about $15 million per year. So this basically sets a new precedent for tight end pay, and I think receiver pay as well. Travis Kelce of the Kansas City Chiefs, he also gets a new deal. He re-ups with the Chiefs for 4 years at $57.25 million, which comes out to about $14.3125 million a year. So a little under $1 million less than what Kittle is getting. So that's pretty interesting. So these two is pretty much resetting the tight end value market. Also in sports, we get the NBA 2020 playoffs. So pretty much all the seeding and matchups have been set. We're just waiting for the play-in with Portland versus Memphis. So in the East, we're going to have the Bucks versus the Magic, the Raptors versus the Nets, the Celtics versus the Sixers, the Heat versus the Pacers. I know Giannis got suspended because he headbutted a player, so I don't know if he's going to be available for the start of the playoffs. I think he might be. But the East is pretty much set. In the West, we have either the Lakers versus Portland/Memphis. Between Portland and Memphis is going to be an interesting matchup, but if Portland keeps playing the way they do, I feel as though they might win that. Lillard has been going off. I think in like a 3-game span, he's put up like 145 points or something crazy like that. Then we're going to have the Clippers versus the Mavs, the Thunder versus the Rockets, which should be interesting because Westbrook, former team the Thunder, so that's going to be interesting. And then the Nuggets versus the Jazz. So should be interesting to see how these play off, because some of the teams in the bubble have not played as well as they had, when they were playing during the regular season before COVID hit. Like the Lakers, they've been struggling, so that could be an issue if they don't get their act together. They could possibly see themselves being bounced out of the first round, but if they manage to get things together, they should be able to pull it off. Yeah, that should be pretty interesting. And lastly, we get UFC 252. So in the main event, of course, we get the trilogy bout between Stipe Miocic versus Daniel Cormier for the heavyweight title. This is pretty much for all the marbles. This is pretty much to determine the best heavyweight of all time. They both have a 1-1 split. Cormier won the first bout. Miocic won the second bout. Cormier is planning to retire regardless of if he wins or loses. So this is going to be interesting. So I don't know. It all depends on who show up. It all depends on who shows up. Anything can happen. They both have beaten each other. They both know what to expect from each other. So I'm expecting a war in this bout. And then we get Sean O'Malley, who's like the newcomer, versus Martin Vera at bantamweight. In this bout, I'm not too familiar with Vera. Malley, he's been riding high on his bout, so I'm thinking Malley might win that. And then we get Junior Dos Santos versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. Rozenstruik is coming off of a loss. I do believe that was again to Ngannou. Ngannou destroyed him, so he's gonna be looking to bounce back. So versus Dos Santos, I think Rozenstruik might be able to come back in this bout, so that should be pretty interesting. We also get an update. Khabib has said that he might possibly fight Conor if he decides to come back and fight Dustin Poirier, and if he beats Poirier, then he will have no problem facing Conor again. So who knows how that's going to play out, because Conor, as he said that he's retired. There was another person that called Conor out to fight, and he agreed to that. But if he wants Khabib, he's going to have to go through Dustin Poirier. But in the meantime, it's going to be Khabib versus Gaethia. So that should be an interesting bout. But we'll just have to see what happens with 252 and what happens with Khabib. But for the most part, that's going to pretty much do it for this week's podcast. I appreciate you all for tuning in. If you're listening on Spotify and everywhere else, I appreciate you all for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you leave a like and a comment below. And until the next one, peace.